Okay, hello, welcome. On behalf of All India Oracle Users Group, a very warm welcome for today's webinar. I think today is a Friday. We understand we are closing the shops and trying to spend time with family, but it's also important trying to get experts from US and also from on this topic, especially on the maximum availability architecture summit. And it is very important to attend all the sessions and do not miss. And also please request you to share with your connections, right? And most of you know about All India Oracle Users Group. This is a platform where you can share and gain the knowledge, as well as importantly, network with fellow Oracle community members. Not only that, we are requesting our community members to share your feedback, insights, and experience about Oracle products while networking with like-minded people. This is very important. Provide your feedback. For example, today we have basically this month we have speakers across from maximum availability architecture team. So it's a very, very good opportunity to provide your feedback. For example, that particular feature is missing. So it's the best time to provide your feedback, right? And, as you know, we are running the theme-based events. This month is really special for us, maximum availability architecture again. This summit is a series of 9 sessions. We have already covered 4 sessions, and this is the 5th session. And a huge thanks to Anil and Marcus for putting this together. They are big supporters of community and especially IOG. And definitely we are missing face-to-face and a lot of hugs, but still we are trying to connect virtually. So please ask all your burning questions. So please try to ask a question very close to the topic. We have a number of topics, so please ask close to the topic, and you can see from the abstract from AOG page. Also ask all your questions in the Q&A bottom of your screen. And if you need any support or any general questions on AOG, please ask in the chat box. Chat box. Continue your conversations. It's very important, right? I think, I don't know, we are keep on pushing. I don't know how many times we told. This is very important to connect in a virtual world in LinkedIn as well as Twitter. Please connect in the virtual world. This is the only way you can make virtual connections globally. And you can actually search AIOG hashtag. That way you understand who is actually joining today, and that way you can connect with them. And we'll upload the presentation material. You can see all the recordings and presentation material already uploaded to the previous sessions. And if you have any questions, please ask. And it's important, since we are all volunteers, we don't really respond emails on time. So it's better to connect in Telegram, ask questions. We are always happy to, respond in Telegram. So with that, very warm welcome to today's speaker, Ricardo Gonzalez. Sorry if I'm pronounced wrongly, but Ricardo, he's a senior principal product manager from Oracle, and especially a database cloud migration, ZDM, and also Oracle ASM cluster file systems. And these especially these areas are very, very close to our DBA community. Ricardo holds a BSc in computer science and master in business administration, focused on entrepreneurs and innovation. Ricardo is passionate about technology, education, photography, music, and cooking. He loves languages, engaging with people from all over the world. I think you should come to India, Ricardo, right? He speaks English, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and is currently learning Japanese, and somewhere hidden in his, I think you should add some Indian languages. Ricardo is a native from Costa Rican, and he also lived in Mexico, Italy, currently resides in the United States. So with that, very warm welcome, Ricardo. And as you guys know, all the speakers are joining from San Francisco. It's early for them. And actually 8 a.m. is very, very important slot. And so they are providing that slot to us. So really thank them, whatever channel you like. Okay, so with that, I'm handing over to Ricardo. Please go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you very much, Sai. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's my pleasure to be here with you. I think Sai did a great introduction on myself. Don't know what else to say about me. I'm Ricardo Gonzalez, and as Sai said, I'm a native from Costa Rica, but I've been living in San Francisco now for a while, and I'm based in Oracle Redwood Shores, which used to be our headquarters. Now moved to Austin, Texas. But yeah, I work in the Silicon Valley office in California. And I've been a product manager for 10 years now at Oracle. And I work for the MAA team. Now, my boss is actually Marcus Mikalevitz, which most of you already know. And we oversee everything that has to do with MAA, right? So anything high availability, scalability, it's like our area. In my case, I own the cluster file system, ACFS, and I've been focusing for the last years, 3 years more, give or take, on cloud migration. So how do you actually move workloads to the cloud? Because it's really important to provide that path, right? We always talk about cloud, but we're not really providing a lot of the tools and actual frameworks to provide that path for you. So with that in mind, Zero Downtime Migration product was born. And well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today, like how the product was born, what it is, what we do, etc. Right? Please feel free to ask any questions. We have people on the chat that can answer. I just put them in the Q&A box. And by the end of the session, I'll be happy to also take more questions from you. Okay, let's get started. So the agenda for today, it's like this, right? I'm going to do an introduction for the product. Then the product has 2 workflows, one physical and one logical. I'm going to go deep in each one of them. Then I'm going to be sharing a bit of a roadmap, so where we're heading with the product. Then if we have time, I'll do a small demo. And then just share some resources with you where you can get information on the product on a public website, step-by-step guides, documentation, etc. Okay. So as I mentioned, ZDM, it's the actual preferred product for cloud migration at Oracle. It's the actually underlying engine for other products that exist. So because as you know, there's also a database migration service with focus to the autonomous database, and it's powered by ZDM. And ZDM was born, some time ago, but it was actually first released in November 2019. And the idea was to have a single engine that was simple, that would allow you to download it and set it up in a Linux box anywhere. It could be running on a compute in OCI, it could be running on your premises, even in the target, if possible, on a separate VM. That's not a problem for us, right? That box, it's simple with the idea that you provide the information for cloud migration, meaning source database information, target database information, backup location, connectivity, etc. And with that information available and fulfilling all the requirements that we ask for, it would be as easy as issuing one command, and then the migration will take place. Of course, as you know, Oracle provides complex technology that is there for built to help with all the different use cases that are powering the world today as we speak. So everything that we think of, airplanes, credit cards, telecommunication, etc. There's some Oracle behind, right? And of course, that complex technology, it evolves over time, and ZDM, it's part of that transition in moving all of these workloads that exist today on your data centers, your customer data centers, into the Oracle Cloud. So when I say simple, yeah, it is simple, and we try to automate and orchestrate the whole process, but of course, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of components into them, right? Now, when the product was born, the idea was that it was born within the MAA family. So it's blessed by the MAA team. Actually, they're part of our testing team in a way. They're always playing with the product and trying to maximize the usage and try to understand all the limits that it has, and also make us compliant into their architecture and the MAA best practices. So we're fully MAA blessed in that regard. It provides, of course, zero data loss, and it's completely free, which is really important, right? Because if we're asking and we're telling, okay, the roadmap right now and the road in the future is moving to the cloud, well, we have to provide an easy way, a seamless way, and also an economical way to move to the cloud, right? And hence, ZDM, with all the different workflows, even the logical one, which leverages Golden Gate, it's free. And I'll explain a bit more how that works, even if we're using products like Golden Gate, so that you can actually migrate to the cloud with no cost for you. Now, how does it work, and what's the architecture for ZDM? I have a diagram later for the different use cases, but basically the way it works is that you'll have a box, as I mentioned. It has to have Oracle Linux 7, and you'll download ZDM. ZDM It's actually quite light. It's 800 megabytes, sorry, 800 megabytes as as a binary. So it's not that heavy at all. Actually, it's quite light. You download it, install it. It's actually quite straightforward installation, as long as the box has Linux 7, Oracle Linux 7, and a couple of packages that we specify on our docs, and that's it. Once you have it, there's a file called response file. That file, and you can have many of them, will actually have information for a specific migration, right? So basically, you'll say, okay, this migration, I want to follow this methodology. This migration will connect to this object storage bucket for backup location purposes. I'm going to use this methodology, either physical online or physical offline. I'm going to use or logical online or offline. Am I going to use an object store? Am I going to use DB links? So you specify all of that information on the response file. You also say, am I migrating to database cloud services virtual machines? Or am I migrating to actually XSCS, Exadata Cloud Customer? Am I migrating to autonomous database? So you specify all of that information. Even for Exadata on premises, we all offer migration with ZDM. And once that information is correct, and there's of course way more, there's many parameters in this file, right? And you'll see as we progress in the presentation how different things need to be addressed and or edited and provided, right, to the tool, depending on your use case and the specific migration approach. But you provide that information, save the file, and then there's a command for migration. There's a ZDM doesn't have an UI; it's actually a command line based tool. So you provide a migration command. So that's why we call it single button approach, which will have information on, basic information on the actual migration, and also that the path for that response file. And that's it. The ZDM will then read it, bet that everything is fine, connect to source and target, and actually perform the migration. How does it work? Coming soon. Let me move alongside the presentation and share that with you. Now, as I mentioned, it's fully MA compliant. We perform checks before the migration and after the migration. You can always pause if you wanted to, and then resume. Now, by the pause mechanism, there's actually two ways of doing this. You can actually pause while performing the migration, right? And then ZDM will pause. But then again, there is caveats to this. Or if you want to, like, we actually specify which are the different stages and phases of the migration on our documentation. So you could actually tell ZDM when you're issuing the migration command. So before migrating, you tell ZDM, for this migration, I want to pause when you have set up a standby in the cloud. Once you reach that stage, please pause, and we'll do that. We'll pause the migration at that moment. Then you can actually perform all the testing you want, and then you can resume it if you wanted to. So there's many possibilities here. We also perform a dry run option, or offer a dry run option. It's basically an evaluation mode for ZDM, which will perform a migration, meaning that it will actually go connect to the source and target and validate everything, but actually not perform the actual migration per se. So it will give you information on what's missing or if there is going to be any issues, right? And of course, you can customize the workflow in different ways. Important and really, really important. As you know, databases on the cloud are encrypted by default. And most databases on premises, not necessarily have actually encryption. They're not TDE or transparent data encryption enabled at source. So we provide a way so that the actual database in the cloud ends up with TD enabled, and that's not a problem, and you don't have to worry about that. In the documentation, we have a specific tables on, depending on the versions and the sources, how would be the actual result at the end. You don't have to worry about that. It is important though, right, that this is a migration tool, right? So if you're migrating to the cloud, and then the target, when you migrate, and it becomes then the primary for your application, ends up as an encrypted database. If you ever want to roll back, which we don't offer the rollback capabilities, that has to be done manually, you have to then enable the encryption at source. But I can explain more when we talk about the physical workflow, about these considerations, right? Now, the tool itself provides a centralized mechanism for migration, and it scales to fleet level. So you can actually perform multiple migrations at the same time, because what we do is when we issue a migration command, we generate a job ID, but then the command line just exits, and then whenever you want, you just call it again and generate a new migration job for a different database, and so on and so forth. So we can actually work in parallel and have multiple databases being migrated at the same time. You can also schedule the operation. So you could say, well, let me migrate my databases at 3 a.m. on Friday when nobody's connected, and I'll come and check them Saturday first thing in the morning. So that can be done as well. We provide a comprehensive audit trail, so a lot of logs actually, so that you know what's happening each step of the way, and you can actually check and verify that everything is fine. Now, for 21C, which is our latest release, and we launched this in March this year, these are pretty much what's new, right? So we offer database migration for standard edition databases and enterprise edition databases. Of course, with standard, there's no limitations. So like you cannot use DataGuard as part of the migration because it's not supported, but we offer other options for that, right? And supported sources are 11.204 onwards. So 12C, 18C, 19C, and of course, higher levels once, that becomes the norm. For targets, we support database cloud services, both flavors: Exadata Cloud Service, Exadata Cloud Customer, and of course the autonomous database, both ATP and ADW, and both shared and dedicated. For time being, we only support source platforms for Linux, meaning the databases that are hosted on Linux. But we're working, and I will be talking a bit more about roadmap at the end of the session as well. We offer non-CDB to CDB conversion, both in the physical and logical workflow. And the logical workflow is easier because it's straightforward, whereas in the physical workflow, we have to perform a plug and plug once we perform the migration. But that's an option that we have right now. So if you're migrating from a non-multi-tenant database, you can migrate to a multi-tenant database without a problem. And we have two workflows, physical and logical. Again, I'll talk more about them in a bit on how they actually work. We also offer the possibility to do an in-flight upgrade, meaning that you can migrate from an 11.204 database directly to a 19C database if you want, but this is only possible with a logical workflow, not with a physical one. And then methodologies-wise, we use Arman and DataGuard for the physical workflow. There's one offline method that only uses Arman and uses a backup and restore methodology. And then there's an online method, which is a combination of Arman and DataGuard. And for the logical workflow, we use DataPump and Golden Gate. DataPump for logical offline, and DataPump and Golden Gate for the logical online. We also incorporated now to DB links if that's what you want and you don't want to have like the object store or any backup location for the migration. But we only recommend it for databases that are like rather small, like so smaller than 100 gigabytes, nothing bigger than that. Okay, and just as trying to like summarizing and like highlighting the actual new feature that came out last March is we introduced logical migration, the non-CDB to CDB conversion in both in physical and of course the logical, that is the new workflow. Support for autonomous database because we didn't have that. We only provided physical workflow and you cannot migrate physically to the autonomous database. So we provided the logical workflow that has now autonomous as a target. You can also migrate to an Exadata database machine using the physical workflow only, which is a new thing, and it's actually quite neat. So it's a good way to provide hardware refresh services. We also have a pre-migration advisor. It's called CPAT, but it's specifically for autonomous database, which will evaluate some things that you might need to take into consideration, especially regarding data pump settings before your migration. We also introduced database link support, and the ZDM home and the binaries are actually like lighter and not as big as before. Before we had like 3.5 gigabytes for the binaries for ZDM. Starting in 21C, the home was trimmed, and it's now like it's compact and it's 800 megabytes. Okay, so now I'm gonna do like a bit of an explanation of both of the workflows, and I'm gonna start with physical migration, which of course was the first one we released in 2019, and we've been improving and enhancing over time. So for physical workflow, you have to go from the same version to the same version. So if you're migrating from 11.204 database, you have to migrate to 11.204, 12.1 to 12.1, 12.2 to 12.2, 19 to 19, etc. Right? We do, however, allow for non-CDB to PDB conversion. So if you're 19C non-multi-tenant or 12C non-multi-tenant, you can migrate to the same version, but to a multi-tenant. We will perform the plug and plug for you. I know this is going to be a question about patch levels. You're just going to tell me, well, what if the same version but different patch levels? There can be a difference in the patch level. Basically, what we do is we perform we run data patch. We execute data patch at the end of the migration automatically for you. So ZDM takes care of this. So if there's a difference in patch levels, we'll take care of that at the target level once we are done with the migration. Target platforms for the physical workflow are like both flavors for database cloud service, Exadata cloud service, Exa cloud customer, and of course the Exadata database machine on premises. You can actually use this as a tool for migrating on your data centers if you are like moving to a new Exadata and performing a hardware refresh. So there's two ways of migrate with the physical migration. The first one is the offline migration. And this is great for standardization databases because, of course, you cannot leverage data guard. And but the way it works is that customers will download ZDM, configure it, perform all the required prerequisites, and like be sure that everything in the source and target level is fine, and then fill the response file with information, right? And then issue the command. ZDM will then start database migration by connecting to the source and target via SSH, being sure that everything is in place, that there's everything works accordingly, and then start the actual migration process, right? So instruct the source database to move ARM and backups to the object store on the customer tenancy. Then in that, we actually recommend that the customer pause the database after backups are being created, so that way there's no new data, no workloads being that are going to be missed, right? Because then that backup that was sent to the object store will then be used on the target database in the cloud to instantiate the new database, right? And then once that database is ready and good to go, we perform the switchover, right? Of course, this is an offline operation, so there's downtime once you are performing the instantiation and doing the switchovers per se. But as I mentioned, it's recommended to pause the database once the backups have been shipped to the object store, because otherwise anything that happens after that on the source won't be recorded, right? And then we finalize the migration, and then of course we do a proper cleanup. This is it could be used for Exadata, it could be used for OCI services, and of course the Exadata Cloud customer. So when you're migrating to Exadata and you're migrating to Exadata Cloud customer, it doesn't make sense to move the backup files to the object store, because that means that you have to go to the cloud and then come back, right? So for that case, we actually provide the option for customers to use the recovery appliance or just NFS, right? That way everything stays within your premises and you don't have to worry about a cloud round trip in that case. Now that would be for the offline of operation, right? But what about online? What if we want to do like proper zero downtime migration with an online methodology, right? So this is how we actually work, and let me actually go step by step with you, so that it's actually more, provide a better graphical experience for you, right? So you'll have ZDM on a box, as I mentioned. It could be running on the primary, it could be running on the target. Ideally, of course, it has to be separated, so it has to be on a VM. It could also be in OCI, on a compute node. That's not a problem. Most of our step-by-step guides that we offer, we're done having ZDM installed on a compute node. And it's, we don't require a lot, as I mentioned, just Oracle Linux 7, a couple of packages, and mostly 100 gigabytes of storage, because we generate a lot of logs, but there's no quite a huge processing power or anything like that that we require for ZDM. Now we install ZDM, configure it, prefill the response file, and issue the migration command. ZDM then what it does is starts the database migration by connecting the SSH to the source and the target, performing all the evaluation and being sure that everything is fine, and then proceeding with a migration, right? It will connect to the backup location. So let's say we're migrating to Exadata Cloud Services. In that case, the backup location will be an object store, and start shipping. We'll create L0 and L1 ARM backups and then ship them to the actual object store. But I'll talk to you more about backup usage and backup creation once we have we reach the roadmap stage, because I have some news for you in that area, right? So once the backups are sent to the object store, what we do is that we actually instantiate the standby using those files, right? And now that we have a standby, what ZDM will do is actually instruct the primary to establish connectivity via SQLnet to the standby database, right? So now what you have is an actual primary and standby configuration with the database on premises acting as a primary and the database on the cloud acting as a standby. So we ensure that everything is fine and the connectivity it's properly working, and that everything is in sync. And in that moment is when we instruct to perform an actual switchover. But let me pause here for a second. You could, if you wanted to, actually pause here, right? And you have a standby, so you can actually do some testing, etc., and then continue if you wanted to. Now, once we're ready, we do a switchover and do a role swap. So that means that the source database is now a standby, and the primary database is now the target database is now the primary. So you have a primary on the cloud and a standby on premises, still connected via SQLnet. And again, you could pause it here if you want to actually create a DR. You could actually instruct ZDM to pause when this stage is reached, and In that case, just kill the ZDM box if you wanted to and move on. But you have to understand, right, as I mentioned, that the primary database in the cloud is encrypted. So all the read logs that it's generating will be TD enabled by default. So whatever is being shipped to the standby will have the same. So if you don't have TD enabled on the source, you will have to, if you wanted to use it and at some point roll back, right? So that's really, really important to bear in mind, right? Now, also bear in mind that TD enablement is not a straightforward operation depending on the version of the database. So if you're in 11.204 or 12.1, it's actually an offline operation. 12.2 onwards, it is an online operation, but it's something that you have to take into consideration, right? Normally, of course, we are not meant to be a DR solution, or we're not meant to be like to configure this kind of architecture. The idea of ZDM is to actually perform the migration, and then once everything is in place, actually just perform cleanup on both the source and the target, and end all the connectivity and have the application connected to the database on the cloud. And that's how actually we work for the online physical migration, right? And that was like our main way of working for a year and a half to almost a year and a half while we had the first version of ZDM 19 and then a patch release 19.7. But starting in March, we introduced ZDM 21C, and that changed everything, right? Because that brought up to the table logical migration, right? And logical migration, it's great. It has introduces a new level of flexibility, more targets, and a different way of working, right? And we support both ways, so we'll have and we'll continue to have both ways, because this is not for everybody. Some people will actually have more straightforward migration or physical migration, not necessarily want to have the extra setup with the logical one, and might not even require it, right? So it really depends on your use case. And so we have to see in a case-by-case basis which type of migration is better for you. Now, let me tell you all about logical migration, which is our new newest feature, and it's a new major feature, right? That includes a lot of different sub features and great functionality. So with logical migration, we can actually do 11G to 12C, 12C to 18C, 12C to 19C, etc. But that means cross-version migration, which is perfect, right? Because we can actually have a database that we wanted to upgrade, but you know what? Why don't we perform the migration, the upgrade at the same time? So we do an in-flight upgrade while migrating to the cloud. Now, this is great to have, but I have to be quite, it's really important to bear in mind one thing, right? Even if this is possible, and we even have a step-by-step guide on the product website that actually explains how to do this. So you're migrating to from an you're migrating from an on-premises 11.204 to a 19C, which is, it could be database cloud service or XSCS. The guide was created with that example in mind, and it works, right? But you have to understand that you have to also bear in mind app certification. So maybe the application is not certified with a target level, so it might be working for 12 but not for 19, etc. So you need to be sure that when you're performing an in-flight upgrade, that you have already tested, if you want it for in development, etc. Your target version with the application, because it would be it's crucial that once the database is in the cloud, everything is in place, and then there's no way to say, well, it's not working because it's the cloud. No, it's not the cloud. It's because it's you didn't do proper testing, and maybe the database version wasn't up to standard or certified for the actual application that you're running, right? So it's always important to have those things in mind. So when you're doing the migration per se, it's an actual complex process. If you add into that mix upgrade, you also have to bear in mind all the variables, right? So it's important to also have that consideration. Now, for non-multi-tenant to multi-tenant, we support that, but it's actually quite straightforward. You don't have to do any conversion, because what we could do is we plug directly ZDM migration into on the target level. So it's actually a great thing that we have with Data Pump and Golden Gate for logical migration. Now, we don't support logical migration for Exadata on premises. That only allows for physical. But you can see here on the right side of the slide, we do support autonomous transaction processing, both dedicated and shared, and autonomous data warehouse, both dedicated and shared, with ZDM, right? Which is great. We don't have that in the physical workflow, but the logical workflow covers those cases for you. And there is a new migration service, DMS, that also does only autonomous database migration, and underneath the covers uses ZDM and our logical workflow, but with a native OCI UI. So I'm more than happy to actually introduce to all of you then the the product manager and the owner of that product, because I think it's a great product that, you know, harnesses the true potential and power of an engine like Zero Downtime Migration, right? Now we have two workflows in ZDM logical migration. One is offline migration, and the other is online. The thing is that we have sub workflows, right? So in the offline, we actually have logical offline with a backup location, and logical offline with DB links, and it's also the same for logical online. So I'm going to go really quickly over them, and then focus more on the logical online with the object store, which is the most common use case. And please, I know we're covering a lot of data, like information, data points, and different like features and functionality. So please feel free to ask all your questions. I know there's a lot of things that I might have not missed or not covered. So please don't worry. I mean, right now we have enough time so that I can cover all the slides and then go to the demo, and then leave enough time at the end for more questions. But please feel free to keep asking questions in the Q&A, and I'll happily answer them. And also my team will help. And if not, once I'm done, I'll happily answer all of your questions. So for logical offline, it's the same as in physical migration, at least the first steps, right? You like download and configure ZDM, perform validations, and then we do the backup location connectivity, right? But in this case, what ZDM does is that actually it exports data pump. So we perform the data pump export, so it moves dump files from the source database to the backup location, in this case, the object store, and then the actual target will do an import from those dump files into that the target database. So it will instantiate target database using those dump files, and then do a switch over. The same as the offline with physical migration, it's important to acquiesce or pause the database once the dump files have been transferred, because anything that happens afterwards won't be registered, right? But you know, it's a straightforward process, and we you know, it's really good if we're doing especially in the future when we support cross-platform migration, right? But this logical workflow, it's great. We also do the same, but eliminate the need to have the object store. So we create database links between the source and the target, and basically do that the import directly from the target, taking the files from the source database. Now we don't recommend this for databases that are bigger than 100 gigabytes, because of course, I mean, there's consideration in place here for network, etc. But it's something that is available if you have smaller databases and you don't want to set up the object store and want to have a more direct connection between the source and target. That's also an option. Now I'm going to focus on the online workflow, which I mentioned is the most used one, and I'll talk briefly about the DB links scenario and then move to the actual object store one, right? So we have the same workflow as in like using database data pump to instantiate the standby, but we actually have a golden gate hub here that actually performs the online sync up between the source database and target database. So we have two microservices working as an extra and a replicate, which will perform all the work, and ZDM will take care of like setting. I mean, you'll have to provide the infrastructure, but we set up and connect to everything and automate the whole process. Now, I don't want to use too much time for this specifically, because I want to drill down on the logical online with object store, and then I'll explain how the actual setup for the golden gate hub is, etc. Right? So this is the same architecture, but it uses the backup location so that the data pump dump files will be actually transferred there and then from there imported, right? It has different ways of working. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to move to the next slide, which actually covers this on a step-by-step basis, so we can actually go little by little, right? So basically, this is the architecture, right? So you'll have ZDM running on a VM, and again, it could be anywhere. It could be on the source, it could be on the target, it could be on OCI compute, right? You'll have your on-premises databases. You'll have your one thing that I haven't mentioned, right? We support single instance databases, rack 1 and rack sources, right? That's we cover all the cases, and then they can be transferred, of course, to single rack and rack 1, right? What we cannot do is a convert. So you can migrate a single to a rack and a single to rack 1, and a rack 1 to a rack 1 or rack, and a rack to rack. So you cannot do from rack to a single instance. That's the only limitation, but we do all the different possibilities. Now, on-premises databases, ZDM running on a separate VM, anywhere, as I mentioned, target database, which could be database cloud service, both flavors, Exadata cloud service, Exadata cloud customer, and of course the autonomous database, right? For the case of Exadata cloud customer, let's leave it for a second, and I'll cover that at the end, because of course the Golden Gate Hub will not be present in OCI. It doesn't make sense, right? If you're migrating to, let's say, a customer to have that Golden Gate hub and OCI, right? And the Golden Gate hub just runs in a compute node on OCI, and you provide that for us with the extract and replicate. But the way it works, it's quite interesting, right? There's a specific image from the OCI marketplace, the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Marketplace, and this specific Golden Gate image has a specific licensing that, it can change, but right now the licensing is 183 days of use while migrating a database with ZDM or your database migration service. So if you're using it by itself, it's different, but I don't think it's actually provision for that. But the usage for this Golden Gate microservice for migration with ZDM, it's, you can use it for 103 days, which is, it's great. It's a great thing, right? So that's what I mentioned at the beginning, right? ZDM is a free product, and the underlying technology that we're using and all the other tools that we're using also provided free with, in some way in these capacities for 183 days, which is 6 months. I think that's more than enough for a migration, right? Now, how do we work, right? We have all of this underlying technology and all these moving pieces. The actual Golden Gate hub, as I mentioned, you have to provision it in our documentation, and a step-by-step guide that we created, and I'll be sharing with you at the end of the presentation, explains how to do this, right? But then ZDM will actually automate and orchestrate the whole process. So let's go step by step. First, as I mentioned, again, going back, repeating myself, but it's really important, right? You download ZDM, 800 megabytes, really easy to install and configure. Then you actually prefill the response file with all the different information. And with logical migration, there's a lot of information in the response file, right? Because you can actually, you have to set up everything, right? The different users, Golden Gate information, data point information. Let's say you have unsupported objects on Golden Gate, so you have to mention those to ZDM on the response file so that we take that in consideration of that. Also, if you want to do a schema or not on data pump, so different modes of exports and so on and so forth. So the response file in logical migration grew, of course, because there's a lot more options and opportunities there for performing a migration that is more flexible and according to your actual needs. Now, once that's in place, you issue a command to migrate, and we connect to the source and target to perform all the validation. So same here as before, right? We then connect to the backup location and be sure that everything is in place. We have enough space to work, etc. And then what we do is we configure your ZDM will take the Golden Gate marketplace image and configure a replicate and start capturing transactions from the source database. And once we start capturing transactions from that source database, we start actually generating trail files that are stored in that Golden Gate hub, right? Then what we do is we actually do an export job from the source database to the backup location. And then what we do is we actually do an import from the target database using those DOM files in the backup location into the target database so that we can actually have a instantiated target. Now, really important, if the target is an autonomous database, this process is like the autonomous database will do the import directly from the backup location by commanded or instructed by ZDM. But if the actual target is actually a different one, XSCS, Database Cloud Service, etc., then ZDM, what it does is it actually copies the files from the backup location into a local file system on the target, and then perform the actual import, data pump import, and instantiating the target on the cloud, right? Now, once we have a cloud target, of course, it's out of sync because it was created out of those DOM files, right? So what we do is we configure the replicate, so a different microservice using the same image on that Golden Gate hub. The replicate function, what it will do is like feed out of those trail files that the extract keep generating actually, and it'll sync up with the target database. And now we have the configuration working in place. And I'll bring this topic again because it's really important. This OCI marketplace image is free of use for 183 days, which is perfect, right? So you have that running in place for of course, for ZDM, for migration with ZDM, right? So you have now the extract and the replicate and each feeding each other, the target database being synced. You could actually tell ZDM you wanted to pause at that moment because then you can actually play around, do some testing and be sure that everything is fine. And then once everything is good to go, what ZDM does is actually perform the switchover, right? The switchover is performed, we finalize the migration and do a proper cleanup and we're done. And that's how logical migration with ZDM works. So now I'm going to talk to you a bit about the roadmap. And it's coming soon. I unfortunately cannot tell you when specifically, but I can only tell you that it's coming soon. And we're introducing new things, right? So we're introducing migration from RDS, AWS-based Oracle databases into autonomous database. But this will only be there for now with the logical offline method. Eventually, we'll have enough, the capabilities to actually perform that also with an online method. So you can actually bring an online database that it's Oracle database sitting in AWS, but actually move to, to OCI. We also will have the opportunity to actually leverage logical methodology to bring Solaris and AX databases that are, so basically Oracle databases that are on Solaris and AX, right? Which is great because that means we bring more cross-platform. And I would like to hear from you if you have any requirements from other operating systems, because we need to understand like where we are and like what customers are asking for. So if you think that we should be also performing a migration from other sources, that'd be great for me to know. Also, we understand that not everybody wants to have that extra hop, as in like going to object store to perform the actual, backup, so that the cloud will, the database will have those backups there to be instantiated. So what we're doing is we're doing direct data transfer, and we're doing a duplicate from active from the primary at source. So that'll also is actually coming soon, right? The other thing is that, as I mentioned, the physical workflow actually uses we create an L0 and L1 backup that are shipped then to the object store or the backup location. But what's if you already have existing RMM backups, right? So we're introducing also the capability to use existing backups as well for you. So that way, you have you can reuse them, and also you don't have to wait until ZDM creates all the backups. And this is actually useful for like bigger size databases, right? We also, have the automatic creation or remapping of table spaces for the logical workflow. The data pump dump size has the option to be estimated with the statistics method as well. We're introducing some enhancements to the CPAD, which, as I mentioned, was the migration advisor. You'd be able to update it from ZDM home and also run some remedial scripts that might offer for you to do some work on your source before actually perform the migration. There's some enhancements to the overall migration process, and of course, there's always fixes that we're providing. So that's what's coming soon, and I think it's quite exciting. I would love to bring more stuff like more online support for other sources, third-party sources, etc. But that's not yet. But in the meantime, that's what is coming soon, and it's actually great for all of us. So now I'm gonna do a small demo for y'all. Can you see it? I think yes. So this was done in conjunction with the Solution Center Brazil. They were great. Vinicius and Diego did a great job with this demo, and I'll explain you what we'll be doing. So it'll be quick, actually. It's not right. So basically, we have an on-premises database that is being migrated to autonomous, right? And we're using ZDM. What we're gonna do is we're actually start the migration job. And then when the moment that the Golden Gate has been created, and there's actually a Golden Gate connectivity, not only between the extract, but also with the replicate. So you actually have an in sync between the primary and that target database. We're going to pause ZDM. And in that moment, ZDM is going to be, of course, is paused. We're going to be doing some DML, some data modification language at source, but then perform the query at the target, right? So we do them some like add some rows, etc. to the source and see how that actually works at the target level. So that means that not only we migrated first the original database, but also if we do some changes, at least some work on that database while the migration is still ongoing, the changes will be reflected, and then we'll resume the migration and finalize. So you'll see how that works. Of course, this is sped up because we want it to be really really quick. But as you can see here, we have the migration command, and also there's a pause after flag, and we tell them please pause after the ZDM monitor gglag phase, right? So we issue a command, it asks for different passwords, and then the migration just moves and starts working really hard, really fast. We start like querying, and we'll do like to see, like, we do a tail of the actual file to see where the ZDM is, right? It's really important for us to be checking exactly where and which different phases we are. I'm just gonna move forward a bit. Yeah, so 1 second. Yeah. So at some point we get here and we actually do the whole GG Hub setup, and this is actually when we come to the actual pausing, as I mentioned, right? So here GG will actually come, and we need to wait until we get to the GG lag, as I mentioned, and when it comes, which is coming soon, ZDM will pause automatically because we asked ZDM to actually pause when it reached to that that specific phase, right? So because we're in that phase is exactly where ZDM stops, and we now have the chance to do some DML and see whether there's an actual sync up between the source and the target before finalizing the migration, right? So we have on the left we have the source database, on the right we have the target database, right? We do a query to see the emp employee and emp table, sorry, and we see that both of them are the same, 14 rows. So on the left, we would do is we actually select on non-existent rows and we verify that they're not there. We then, sorry, this is going a bit fast. Let me just go back. I'll show you, right? So we do the select and we see that there's those records don't exist both in the source and target. So what we do later is that we actually do the insert of those records at the source level, right? Once we have done that specifically, what we do is we do select on the source and we see them there, right? Now, we will do now the select on the target and we see that they are also there. That means that although ZDM is paused, the actual Golden Gate hub is still working and it allows us to do some DML at the source level without a problem, right? And it's all good. It's all in sync, no problem, right? So what we do now is we actually resume the migration. Basically, what we tell ZDM is with a command line, we tell them resume job with the actual job number, and ZDM will continue then specifically to finalize the actual migration process, and at some point do the actual like switch over, right? And in this case, it's done. Of course, it's a bit sped up and it's a smaller database, but we completed the migration without an issue, without an actual hiccup, right? And that's one thing that you can actually do with ZDM, among many other things. Now, as I mentioned, it's it's been quite a journey, and the product is only ever evolving and ever growing and adding new features and functionality. What I would like to do is actually share with you guides on how to actually set up environments like the one you just saw, migrations, right? So just before I share that, I just want to cover just a bit of a summary, right? It's ZDM is the actual default tool for migration, and it's also the engine for newly migration solutions that Oracle is bringing up and offering to you, like the database migration service. We cover all different targets in the cloud at OCI database level, which is bare metal virtual machine, Autonomous Database, Exadata Cloud Service, Exadata Cloud Customer, and Exadata. Now, I remember I mentioned I told you that for logical migration, where for Exadata Cloud Customer, we wouldn't make sense to have the Golden Gate hub on premises. Sorry, in OCI, right? But the OCI marketplace image is for deploying in an OCI compute node. So if you have Exadata Cloud Customer or a customer that has that and wants to migrate and wants to do logical migration for a specific reason, please contact me, and then we can talk and see options for the Golden Gate hub usage, right? Now, moving forward, we offer, just to summarize again, we have multiple migration workflows that leverage Arman, DataGuard, DataPump, Golden Gate, all of our best-in-class HA and MAA, foundation and tools of best-in-class high availability. We fully automate the process for you, and we're fully cost-effective because there's no cost to the product. And then if you're leveraging things like the Golden Gate image from the marketplace, it's free of charge for 183 days for your migration with ZDM. So it's the best way for you to go. Now, where can you get information, right? So our page is as follows. That's number one, and you can www.oracle.com/go/ZDM, and over there you'll find everything that is here, right? So documentation. We have a physical migration step-by-step guide that works from migrating a database between same version, and we actually cover everything from the installation of ZDM all the way to troubleshooting at the end. And the same thing for logical. We offer logical migration guide that has an in-flight upgrade. So what we do, that guide's really recent. It came out a month ago maybe, and goes from 11.204 to 19c, from an on-premises database to target database in the cloud that it's DBCS or XSCS. It's the same process, right? So yes, that'll be pretty much it for me today. Let me just go back to the main screen, and then I'll I'll be answering your questions. But thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. It's been actually great talking to you. And it's great. We have 50 minutes. So we have 10 minutes to actually do all your questions and answers. So let me go to the Q&A and answer them live, right? So would you like to know if there is the roadmap support FTX with object storage migration ZDM? Well, we're working, of course. There's the idea is to include more workflows and more different capabilities. One of them, yes, it's along those lines, but it's not in the, I mean, it is in the future, and I cannot tell you when, but it's not in the next release, which is what I was talking about when I said coming soon for that roadmap, right? But it is coming, right? So I don't know if I can, yeah. Interested that I have, yeah, okay. So Prakash says, how actually data sync take place with aggregation terabyte data? If you UGG thing, we can start delete in the background to load, so how it works with other method. Okay, so if you have really big databases, right? I mean, you can still use the logical migration workflow, but I think we have to take different things into consideration, right? Whether you have fast connect, and you must actually, and then whether you actually want to do logical migration. Maybe you want to do physical migration, and that's a better way for us to leverage existing backups when the next release comes, or do an actual direct migration when the next release comes, or in the time being just also generating those RMM backups. So we take that on a case-by-case scenario, on a size-by-size scenario as well. So if you want, Prakash, I mean, here's my Twitter account, so you can contact me there, and then of course I'll then provide my work email, and any questions, yeah, more than happy. My database 13 terabytes, which is non-CDD EBS database. How do you know what kind of options to use in a CVI video system, like no copy, or converting on CDB and CDB? And we need to run two mandatory transaction scripts, CDBS. The ZDM will take care of those. Well, yeah, so actually it's great that you're actually asking. Let me dissect that question in different phases. Let's talk first about the scripts. ZDM does have the capability actually to do scripts that you add, like, so we call it like action scripts. So for the source or the target, and you can actually say, well, I want at this phase for you to run this script, and you provide us the action script, and we do it, right? So that's something that you can configure yourself. You will not see, I mean, permissions, etc. But we have that capability. As per which like what to do and what to know. Well, the ZDM doesn't like guess anything. There's flexibility on the response file to tell exactly how do you want the migration to be performed. So in this case, I really like that you've been really specific. Why don't you like send me an email, and we can actually have like maybe a follow-up call. I'll be happy to help you with your migration. Let me actually, in the answer, I'm going to put the actual Oracle email in case it's not provided by here. I mean, I don't have it in the slide. But yeah, just to be an email. So Brahadish is saying, is there any future scope ZDM or immigration tool to migrate data from Oracle to MySQL and vice versa? Well, I can tell you that we would like to have the other way around, non-Oracle source to an Oracle source. I cannot tell you that we are planning on doing Oracle to a different source, but we are planning on having a non-Oracle source with to an Oracle source, and then of course Golden Gate will be a big part of this picture. It's not in the next release, but it's something that we're definitely thinking of, right? So it's, yeah, so thank you for your question, Radish, right? Golden Gate need to be on the source too. Well, it's not or the source on the target. Golden Gate basically it's on a compute node on OCI, right? And it actually we create a microservice that will act as an extract that will take information from the source, and a replica that will actually feed out of those the files created by the first microservice, the extract, which are called trail files, and then connect to the target and perform that sync up. Now, you don't have to use Golden Gate. You can actually do a logical offline migration, or you can do a physical migration that doesn't require Golden Gate as well. So it's actually, it really depends on your use case, right? Cosela HD, right? Famous on Twitter. What kind of link is required to have decent data and more diagnosed to OCI internet dedicated thing plus interconnect? Well, I mean, it's interesting. People ask me about recommendations, and then they say, how long will it take for these size database, etc. My answer is the fast you can get, and then we don't give estimates, but because it really changes from database size to, latency changes from customer to customer, etc. So it's really important that the faster you can get, and if you can get, the fast fast connect as possible, then that'll be ideal. But just to be a bit more specific, right? If you have a specific use case within a specific size of a database, where you're located, which data center you're migrating to, please just contact me, and then we can see that. And I'm more than happy to just have a dedicated Zoom with you. When anyone that has any questions, will just like, if you have a specific use case and you have a customer that wants to migrate, of course, right? So just reach out to me, and I'll happy assist you with that. Okay, Srinivasan says, so it needs to communicate with the source DB server. What kind of network setup we need to set up? So whether the ZDM should be installed on any Bastion server or public subnet on the target NDB system. What is the minimum bandwidth requirement? Is it supporting needs like a VPN, or needs dedicated network setup, like fast connect for data transfer copy? So for specific networking, we have a plethora of services and configurations. We also support Bastion if you wanted to, but it's not required per se. I mean, we just require SSH access to the source and the target, and so connectivity between the source and sorry, the ZDM to the source, ZDM to the target, and then the source to the target, and the source to the object store. And there's different ways of communicating which one, right? So like SSH for ZDM to the source and target, SQLnet for the source and the target, and then HTTPS for the source and the actual object store. But again, there's also other options. So my recommendation actually would be, so let me actually type the answer here for Shunasan, right? Please go to our website and go to the documentation, because it really depends also on the type of migration. It could be physical or logical, and then you'll see that there's many options, right? If you, of course, still have questions, just tweet me, or like send a message through to Twitter, or email me, and I'm happy to answer, right? Okay, whether is ZDM configured Golden Gate replication as part of the migration? Is it integrated parallel extract or parallel replicate? Well, you have to provide the OCI compute, and there's some steps that you actually have to provide, but then we do perform all the actual configuration and setup of that, right? Now, consider again, why not have the Golden Gate Hub and ZDM in the same marketplace image? Okay, you could actually have ZDM if you want in that same box, but not not in the actual marketplace image, because the marketplace image has a specific licensing that is owned by the Golden Gate team and work with the OCI team, and ZDM is apart, right? So we could actually have ZDM in the same compute if you wanted to. I mean, I haven't done it, and I'm not sure. That'll be an interesting architecture to think about. But in the same marketplace image, I mean, no, because it has a specific licensing, right? And ZDM also has a specific license. So that's not going to happen. Can we migrate EBS database using ZDM? Yes, actually, yes, you can. If you have the actual how you call this need right now, because you want to migrate some of them. So this produce Chaudhary. If you have some needs right now because you have EBS database that you need to migrate, just email me, and I'll be happy to take your case and see how can we work with this. Now, you mean Golden Gate can be used to signal Oracle DB with Oracle database? Answer live. And no, I didn't say that. We don't have the source. I mean, Golden Gate has a lot of capabilities, but for this specific use case, we use Golden Gate to sync up an Oracle source and an Oracle target, right? Like ZDM doesn't do that, right? And then, and Suraj was really kind to actually share as a question the link for a live lab for ZDM. So I'm gonna leave that there. So if anyone can see the actual Q&A, they can see Suraj from our team, great product manager, a live lab that was just recently created, and it's logical offline migration, nothing else but logical offline, but it goes through all the steps and actually installing ZDM in OCI, etc. Now we're creating and also a logical online one for you. So yeah, answer live on. So Karthik is asking if ZDM support MySQL as target. No, this is not something that is in place yet, but I can see why people want to have that, because we have a MySQL OCA database service. So hopefully that comes soon, but I don't have any answer on when that's going to happen. Okay, I think we went through the whole Q&A, and we're like 10 seconds short, so that's perfect. Is there any more questions?
Hey, thanks, Ricardo. I think definitely there will be a lot of questions after this session, right? I think the best thing is we are asking you guys to basically ask question in the Twitter and tag to Ricardo as well as Oracle Rack product managers, right? And that way, if they answer, it will be really helpful for the global community, right? So why we need to keep it in this secret webinar, right? So please ask your follow-up questions. And I think we also shared Ricardo's email ID. I'm sure it will be flood of emails. So please, reach out to them. It's important, right? So I think they are the product managers and we are using the products, right? So we need to provide feedback. And also, like, as I mentioned, starting the presentation, provide your honest feedback. You don't require to provide a positive feedback. If you compare any other products with another vendor, so please provide the feedback, right? So that way they can improve, and it's Oracle is our product. So anyway, I'll stop there. So thank you very much, Ricardo. It's early morning for you, as well as we have Marcus joined, always helpful, joining and answering a lot of questions during the presentation. So again, we want to see you, in upcoming sessions. So thank you very much for your time.
And hopefully next time I can actually visit you all in India and present there. It'll be my pleasure.
Absolutely. And before that, you can also add your languages, maybe Hindi or any South Indian languages, that way you can, your face looks Indian face, but still you have to add some Indian language. So thank you very much. And, guys, I think I'm always trying to ask this poll question, but I always forget. So please join Telegram, right? So this is only channel we respond very quickly. Maybe it is too much messages for you, but you can always mute that channel. Please join and ask questions in the Telegram channel. And what's coming? It's very important. As I mentioned, these are like a sequence of webinars, and this is a way designed by Anil and Marcus. So it's important to attend all the sessions. Also important to share with others, right? So what's coming from Ludovico? Oracle fleet patching and provisioning architecture and internals. So it's very important session. So please register as well as share with your connections, right? So with that, thank you once again, Ricardo, as well as Marcus, and happy Friday, right? Happy weekend for everybody. So with that, we are closing today's session. Thank you.
Yeah.